Okay, right. Greetings, everyone. Dorsey's Resource. Greetings. I'm going live real quick. Uh, the title of this video is going to deal with the TDA secret accounts were real until gatekeepers or paid government agents showed up. This is also going to be Q&A for those of you guys. I'll wait till you come in. So I'm going to be discussing a little bit. I have some notes with me on why I feel that the TDA accounts were real until gatekeepers, trolls, and government agents showed up. This is going to be kind of like also a recap because last year there was a movement that basically broke out, adjust the camera somewhat, where you had individuals who were using their so-called secret account. I didn't know this, but I had known about the numbers from the back of the Social Security card. It's not just necessarily just a control number or account number. It has a dual purpose, in my opinion. I've actually looked at documents and researched this. I've been part of this movement for a number of years. I don't have an official card carrying membership in the so-called redemption education. There's different groups. I pulled information from different sources, but I'm going to go over with you very credible information. And with the certain gatekeepers in particular who are adamant with dealing with some things I'm going to go over with trying to spook you away from this. I did do some previous videos and mention, in my opinion, they do not want people on a massive level to know about this. When I used to discuss this with a friend of mine some years ago, he would mention that he felt that they didn't want too many people to do this themselves when he was trying to gather basically an understanding of this. And he helped me out throughout the years. He was a very good debater, studied multiple languages, linguistics, the banking system, secret societies, eschatology. Things you might not understand are actually related to this type of information. So this is where I'll try to come in and help connect the dots for you. But my purpose is I'm here to explain dealing with the so-called sovereign movement. Keep in mind, sovereign citizen, that's an umbrella term that's used to discredit people from looking into this type of information that actually deals, I like to call it, with redemption education. It's like unconventional information. Like if you were to go to an unconventional university, this is what I told some relatives, like the equivalent of you have to be very skilled. And I'm going to go over some of my credentials briefly. I was going to do a whole nother separate video for this. Big shout out to you. I see you in the chat, Lord Scientist, real quick in the building. Shout out to you once again. Appreciate you, family, and the support. But my credentials is some years ago, I was a perfect straight A student. But this was before my 8th grade year when I was in middle school. Just to give you guys a little background, there's a reason why people go over credentials, so you know that this shows credibility. I'm not hiding behind a fake account like some people suspect. A particular gatekeeper or agent out there where they're always mentioning information and the type of energy they're coming off. Some people have told me privately is really negative if they really sincerely cared about helping people. But I think they have an ulterior motive to try to destroy and steer people away from this type of information, as I was going back to earlier, because they don't want people to know, like, they don't want the left hand to know what the right hand is doing and vice versa. They want to keep you boxed in. And when the system fears, a friend of mine had brought this up, giving props to credit where credit is due to a good friend of mine. He knows when he sees this video, he's going to know who I'm talking about. But he said, when the system can't make money off of you, and gatekeepers in particular who benefit off this, they feel threatened when you leave the plantation. It's very similar, with fear-mongering tactics with the Democrats use, for example, liberals tactics where if you become dependent or independent thinker and you're not toting the particular line that they want, then you're going to be considered a threat to them, or they're going to be afraid because they're making money off of keeping you programmed. And many years ago, I woke up and I wanted to do a separate video dealing with. I see that I've just found out about a week ago. There's this movement called hashtag Walk Away, and I wanted to get my thoughts on it myself because I heard some people out there were saying they felt they had already been infiltrated, but I saw a massive amount of people walking away from the Democratic Party. I was shocked. I saw a lot of Black people and women in particular. They say over 95% of Black women voted for Hillary Clinton statistically, even though they're trying to tell you at the same time that Russians interfered with the election. Think about it, interference, but they still got statistics on which groups did what. No, I think, they didn't expect Trump to get in office, and, their plans kind of messed up. See something very similar to, I'm kind of the way I'm breaking things down to this gatekeeper in particular. I see, gonna go to the chat real quick. Again, I see Aubrey Gray says, hello, Dorsey. It's great to see you again. Thank you. Big shout out to you, Aubrey. Lord Scientist, you are for the people and our total freedom. Hashtag freedom and support you, my brother. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Always much love, scientists. So going over the notes I have, the reason why, in my opinion, but first, I normally give a disclaimer and I didn't really give that yet. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. Please understand everyone's individual circumstance or situation may be different. It's up to every individual competent person to please do his or her homework and research into this matter being discussed. This information is not to be construed as legal advice. In an event you feel you need to seek a competent professional, please do so at one's own leisure. Dorsey's Resource is not liable or responsible for any misuse of this information. These are simply my thoughts and opinions on the subject matter being discussed. With that being said, all rights are reserved. Now, family, to get back in, the reason I feel, and I know I actually have the evidence that the TDA accounts, the so-called secret accounts, were real, and there is a connection to the Treasury. There's different departments of the government. And I'm going to go over, I've got a plethora of notes right here. But when these payments were going through PayPal after you verified the FRB, which was actually working at the time. I have a video where I downloaded the evidence because they shut this guy's YouTube channel down. It was actually several people, a couple channels they shut down, but this was last summer because YouTube was in collusion with, because it's controlled by Google as well. And then they have a parent company called Alphabet that's in line with trying to program and brainwash people. And they got, I believe, in my opinion, some gatekeepers and trolls and government agents and this type of information trying to make it difficult for people and shut this down. So I wanted to provide clarification, to give you guys, let you know that these accounts are real, or they were. Now, through 6 degrees of separation, which I'm not going to go into, I'm not really in the loop. I do have some contacts up there high up, but I was going to go over, some people gave me some information last year. I have some people to try to still get in contact with. I haven't forgot about you. Forgot there was a guy out in New York that said he was a SPC, that stands for Secured Party Creditor, and he has some information as to what happened dealing with the Federal Reserve. Said they changed the process, but this was like a secret loophole. So going over, the first point was that with PayPal, the when you did the process correctly, your actual FRB bank would show up and it would link to your PayPal account. And the reason I'm not doing a screen capture, I already did a couple of videos, but one of my videos a while ago, it got flagged for copyright infringement or whatever. I forget what it had to do with specifically, but I think there was haters and trolls out there. So I'm doing a vlog type video and go over the notes and, what my credentials are. I may go over them again, how, I kind of maybe got off track, but I had people who were former military I worked with that had secret security clearances that have confided in me and shared things with me privately, and I connect pieces together. I'm a researcher. It's what I do in general. But when I was in middle school, my last year in 7th grade, they had an awards banquet, and my teacher at the time, his name was Mr. Height. I went to a Christian school at the time. It was a private school where parents had to pay tuition at the time. and he surprised me at an awards banquet. I was student of the month. It was interesting. The following year, I enrolled in eighth grade. I was, I believe, it was called magna cum laude. I was a perfect straight A student. I had the highest scores in the class. This is real talk. Me and my former classmate, rest in peace to her, Naomi Grant. We were the top students in the class. We actually went on a private field trip. Some years ago, I was very hurt when she passed away because I'm, a private person. Found out from her brother on Facebook. I don't really use the chat or say that much, but I do read the comments on there. And but I'm just mentioning this to show credibility that I read. I was an academic, highly astute. This is before I even started high school. Just to go over, and we went on a private field trip to this. I was actually already familiar. Was at a UD University of Detroit Mercy some years ago. The top students of the school entirely, because our school was a middle school, high school, and elementary school combined in one. So I'm just kind of showing, some background about myself to show this information I'm going over is credible. I know some of you all that know me personally know that it's reputable. For those out there, for trolls or people that don't believe what I'm saying or whatever, I'm bringing these things up to provide credibility. And I have worked in a form of corporate America before. I worked at the college that I attended some years ago as a work study. I worked for several different departments. I saw how the infrastructure of the school was ran. I worked at the bookstore. I worked as a custodial, which they call custodial engineering. Then I worked as an administrative assistant in the student development center at the time before they merged the departments to the enrollment center. And then I worked for a college instructor, by the name of Jim Donovan. This was at Davenport University some years back. I am college educated, and I learned some of these things, but actually in the redemption movement actually helped me connect these pieces together. I see him in the chat real quick. Spoonfork says, "What's up, Dorsey? What's up, Spoonfork? Big shout out to you." He says, "I went to private school in Southwest Detroit." Okay, cool. That's what's up. Lord Scientist said, "Everybody like and share because he's about to drop some jewels that will help free our people." You got it. So I didn't want to spend too much time, but I left Evangel in ninth grade. I had all A's and B's. I started there late because my relatives, I had two relatives that were helping pay the tuition at the school, and it got to be too expensive. And they were trying to get me in like Ivy League public school at the time, but they didn't know at the time that you had to take the test when you were in middle school. It was between the top schools and the public schools in the city. They're like they represent the Ivy Leagues for the Detroit public schools, Renaissance, Martin Luther King, and Cass Technical High School. And I think my relative was trying to get me mainly in Cass Tech, and Renaissance was closer because I was on the west side of the city. But however, they didn't know at the time that you had to because I would be going from ninth grade on to into 10th grade, and you have to have already had taken the test. And there's kind of like a boule thing too. That would be like a whole nother video where your parents are in the know, or somebody you kind of initiated, and that's how certain parents and individuals have inside information or inside track. And why me myself being an academic didn't go certain directions, or reason why I may not have gone to Yale or Harvard. It's a certain pathway that you're groomed earlier on. So I'm just going over, I'm highly, intelligent. I'm not saying I'm the smartest person, but these are some credentials that I have that I'm just kind of going over with you guys to show credibility. Because I've told a friend of mine that, when we bring this information up sometimes to some of our relatives that are, for example, they're political, they look down upon you. It's just because they agree with you. They act like some of the women act like they take rank over us. I was telling a friend of mine, his mother-in-law is like a retired school teacher. And it's like, when we bring up certain things, if it doesn't fit the narrative or it sounds conspiratorial, then they'll just try to brush you to the side. No, I'm very well studied. I read articles, not just from the mainstream media, but also the alternative media. And I have a very good memory. A lot of people I had people that were academics that have told me that personally, that think it's phenomenal. I didn't think nothing of it, but I actually did research on myself and discovered that I have a partial, not necessarily photographic memory, but look up autobiographical memory. And there's a difference. I have a form of autobiographical memory. I would say not in the traditional, conventional form, but a different type that, it stretches out pretty far, where I can actually remember back to when I was a baby, certain events and things. People find that to be pretty phenomenal. But I didn't want to get too far off track. I just wanted to kind of go over with you guys, the credibility that I have from doing research and looking into this information. And this particular gatekeeper out there, I'm not going to even say the name. Some of you all may know who I'm talking about, but there are others who don't want you looking into this type of information. The second thing, I had a friend of mine that went to the same church I went to years ago. He's married. He has children already. He's older than I am. And he told me he had his IRS master file printout pulled up. You can have this done in many major cities. If the IRS, they have an office, and it had his, that showed that he told me that companies were using his social security number, SSN number, because they say this is part of the secret account that's tied in with the TDA. It's the QSIP number. And I know a guy who knows a broker that can look up your QSIP information. So I'm just showing credibility. I know that this is real. I even met someone of the legal profession who was a paralegal at the time, who successfully discharged payments using checks off a closed account. So there was a guy that had a site some years back, I think it's still around, called Stop the Pirates. It's kind of like a blog online. If you come across it, you look up information on the closed accounts. But one thing I want to say is that because of these gatekeepers that have come out with government shields, they're trying to make it more difficult for people to discover this information or even get remedy or success, intentionally. And I feel like this is very, this is malicious. This is cold blooded. At least they should have helped out the people in the know. When I attended this private event some years ago, a private seminar, I felt that they should have finished walking us through, those of us who were learning the information and going through the process. This is why I tell many people who ask me questions about the black card, was it real? Did I get a chance to use it? No, I did test it out. That it showed the bank that I went to, the ATM machine read that it was real, it was readable at the time. But things are also changed too back then versus now, where they started putting microchips and they mandated it in all of the new debit cards in general. And I think, with credit cards in general. Now, I'm not sure in particular for certain types of credit cards or business accounts real high up or whatever, but I do know that in general, like the bank debit Visa cards that are also debit and credit have to be mandated. They had to have the chips in them. If you didn't have it updated yet, banks they already went through that. So you guys can do your own research. I also know, these are from some notes that I'm taking. A guy or someone I know personally who had, there was a company here in Michigan that was contracted through the IRS, like they're like a debt collector, but it was directly through the Internal Revenue Service, but they were acting as a third party. And it was for like state taxes. This individual told me, this is a true story. I documented this. I'm not going to say their name to protect their identity, but this is a confirmed story to show that this stuff with the TDA is real, because something powerful happened. Well, they actually stole his check, and where they didn't credit it to the so-called taxes or state taxes he owed. So he found out where their office was located at here in Michigan, and tracked them down and went up there in person and told them, if they didn't correct the matter, he was going to file a lawsuit and I guess go public, maybe even contact the news, which I suggested you do to make it even more public. But did you know his account was zeroed out the same day? He told me in the computer screen, just like that, they zeroed out. So you can't tell me that the social security number It's not a control number connected to the secret account. I know that this was real. Now they've changed some things, and due to the fact that you have all these gatekeepers and trolls and haters. And once again, keep in mind, when not just the system, but when gatekeepers who are making money off the system, they feel threatened, gatekeepers will use fear mongering tactics to keep you enslaved or dependent on them, because a lot of times they're making money off you and they want to continue or to keep you programmed, or they feel that it's going to bring down or it's a threat to the system. And it's not that. This is not anti-government or nothing. You're actually, what I learned from the redemption movement actually teaches you how the government was formed, the basis. Common law, statutory law, and these things were created out of common law, but statutory law and other types of law is just more for corporate, because technology, through innovation, things change, but a lot of the principles of, they had to create other laws for specific, like ordinances and things. You had general laws like with the 10 commandments, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. But when you started engaging in commerce, just to give you guys a brief portion of history and background as we move into the modern day era and moving into the future, when the Erie Railroad Tompkins case in 1938, if you all do your research, you can look this up, changed all of the court systems in this country from from common law courts to de facto statutory courts. There were only like a few, and they hid it. And equity is another word that's connected to common law, by the way. These are things you have to study and do research. I did some reading recently and found out and got a better understanding doing some research on common law. Look up these definitions and terms online, and this gatekeeper individual tell you that there's this thing where the straw man is a scam thing. There's an actual term they use in the court system that refer to the legal person. They actually use that term as well, called in lingus. And I learned that, giving props to Jonah Bay from studying his material. Mad props to him. And I looked up the definition online, because you have online encyclopedias and online dictionaries to do if you really want to know what these terms mean. And this is why, in my opinion, I believe why they took Latin out the schools years ago. In my humble opinion, they wanted to dumb us down, because the court system, a lot of the words in the Black's Law Dictionary, Latin is like a parent language to the English language. When you study the origin of the English language, there was even a version of the English that we speak called Old English. And there's a connection to Latin. And a lot of my older relatives who I would get in conversations with about this information would have a better understanding, because they took Latin in school. And then for some of them, I guess it was mandatory before they removed it out of the high schools. I see someone in the chat, Alan Thomas, everything's at the probate court. Yeah, you're on the right track. Definitely. I won't get maybe in that part, but yeah, the probate court, it plays a part, because I'm still learning myself and connecting these pieces together. I'm also going to go over why, once again, in case you're joining me, this video is about, in my opinion, why the TDA secret accounts were real. And I'm saying until gatekeepers and government agents showed up. I have some notes that's going to go over when this movement kicked off last summer, when people were using the so-called SSN numbers to pay off their bills, and they started getting reverse payments, this, that, and the other. And PayPal, I heard pressure was put on PayPal by the FBI, but I went over previously. I have the video of this guy's YouTube channel. They shut down. He showed the evidence where when you would link, you had to do a particular procedure correctly. It was like a loophole. Then the Federal Reserve Bank would show up and it would link to your PayPal account. And there was IT people that even commented, people who do work in information technology, that's like what computers, said the way these programs and stuff are set up, this is not just by coincidence or by design. So there was, it may be compartmentalized as far as the ruling class elite that has the secret cheat sheet to this information, that they have specific people designated to use these types of accounts and IT through that runs through these corporations systems to build these types of databases and things of that nature. But you guys get what I'm saying. So they actually commented and said that, you know, these accounts were real, contrary to popular belief. So I got some more notes with me. Okay. And this is kind of a recap too. This guy last year, I heard he looked up his deceased brother's account and it was still collecting interest. This is from another story I heard from an individual. It may have been on Mike O'Brien's conference calls when we were doing the conference calls last year. I also myself, I looked up my BC some years ago back on Treasury Direct, and it showed the alleged amount my bond was trading at. And there are some people out there that debate whether the birth certificate is a bond. One thing I can say for sure, it is a form of a registered security. And I'll say that again because this gatekeeper was trying to say it's not a bond. And I have the document to prove that it is. I went to a private seminar. And some of you all that know me personally have seen the paperwork and know that I'm not lying and I'm not making this up. And they actually, some of them actually told us they wanted us to show or teach people who were trying to learn this information appropriately. Now, there's some people out there that don't have good intentions, but they did tell some of us that, you know, to properly educate people. Because one thing you have going on is you do have people who are ill-informed and file documents and inappropriately because they have not taken the legal class or have not been properly educated on the subject matter or process they are using. That's like with these so-called site drafts. I was going to speak on Barton Butts. He was an investigative journalist years ago. I did research, and he wrote a book called, helped write a book called Cracking the Code. And he actually, this was gone over in the book from what I read, that he met, and there was information notes that used to be online before Scribs took them and started charging people on their site. That information used to be free before Scribs took over. A friend of mine that did research said Scribs is owned by the Discovery Channel or controlled by them. So I don't know how he got that information, but keep that in mind. This was public information online. I did a lot of reading at first. Believe it or not, I didn't just come out, you know, my mother's womb knowing this information as a figure of speech. I had to do heavy research, and I paid my dues. I went to classes years ago, and I paid even for this information. So I put in work, you know, for this. Just for those of you out there that may not know, I have experience, but I'm going over the reason I'm doing this video is I'm here to explain the legitimate side. Yes, you do have scams and stuff out there. I'm not saying you don't, but I'm here to provide to my listeners and viewing audience that there's another side to this that Virgo Triad and other gatekeepers and Shills and agents aren't telling you, that I know for a fact this is legitimate, this was legitimate, and they're trying to hide it. And once again, these gatekeepers will fearmonger because they don't want you getting off the plantation. They want to keep you programmed and brainwashed, and they don't want you waking up. So just keep that in mind. Also, I discovered on my own research, I was one of the first people in the movement. I'm going to go back to the chat in a minute. I do see it, people joining in. I discovered business and law is a class that I was supposed to take down a road in college. I didn't get there yet as I was pursuing my bachelor's degree, but they have a curriculum. And I came across this book, and no one else in the movement mentioned this except for myself. But I discovered that a lot of this information was in this college course called Business and Law. And I'm not sure if it's taught at certain high schools. So I just wanted to share that information related to this redemption education. There was a chapter on negotiable instruments that it's pretty obvious. Well, it was called Commercial Paper, I believe, and that dealt with negotiable instruments, which is pretty self-explanatory. Then there was another chapter on secure transactions that deals with UCC financing statements. And no, there's not a scam, but once again, you have people who may be ill-informed and file documents incorrectly. And this is why you do have some of the chaos going on with people they feel that are tying up the court systems and stuff. But once again, they may not have taken a legal class or even this business and law class to properly understand how to file these documents in the county or at the Secretary of State or whatnot. But this class is like this information was encoded or encrypted within it. And a movie I highly recommend checking out is called National Treasure Part 1 and 2 with the actor Nicolas Cage. This information is very similar to National Treasure, how it's encrypted. It'll give you an idea how you have to be, you have to connect the dots. And I went over my background earlier. That's the reason why, as an academic, I went over my educational background to show, how I connected some of these pieces and the credibility that I have from doing research and being intelligent. And I'm also left-handed, by the way, and there's studies you can look up online about left-handed people. It's pretty self-explanatory. And I won't say go over my astrological sign. I'll probably say that for another video. But that has something to do as well. Another thing is that's right. A third-party check verification merchant I was on the phone with. This is evidence I'm going over. Looked up my SSN along with the routing numbers I gave them for my account and told me that she could see the numbers in the database, actually, that linked to two different accounts that I had. So that was confirmation right there with this whole process, like dealing with telecheck. And this individual was trying to say, so they have some type of secret loophole, I know, set up because this wasn't just sitting there randomly. People could be suing for identity theft or other things if this didn't have a specific purpose with discharging or setting off debt. So this is some more clarification. I just took notes on all the different pieces of evidence to prove, and what, in my opinion, why these TDA, so-called Treasury Direct accounts, are real. And some people say it's not called a secret account or it's a private account. Keep in mind, look up the definition of the word private and secret. They mean practically the same thing. People like to get into these semantics games, and there are different departments of the Treasury. So it's like an umbrella term, but Treasury, TDA, Treasury Direct accounts, still, even if it's Secretary of Treasury, still deals with the Treasury because they're all part of the same governmental family. Whether they're brother, sister, cousins, they're still family. So just to keep it short and sweet, I call it TDA, and it's connected to your SSN, which your SSN is connected to your BC birth certificate, also known as your bond certificate, which is being traded on the Circle 750, or you have to study if you've ever taken a securities class or had a securities license. And this is taught in certain college books. A friend of mine's wife gave me her college, one of her accounting workbooks, and it talked about marketable and non-marketable securities. So you have marketable securities and then you have non-marketable. I'll let you all out there do your research. So individual out there trying to say that the birth certificate is not a bond. Well, I do know it's used to pledge to back other items that are bonds or collateral. It is a form of a registered security. And this is a fact. You can do your research on that, contrary to this individual out there that's putting out this disinformation. So I want to debunk that right now. Okay, I'm going to go to the chat. I've seen a lot of people jump in. I'm going to shoot up real quick. Start off, see Greg Clark. Yo, what's up? What's good, family? Dorsey, please check out Jamel Flicks on YouTube. Okay, big shout out to you, Greg. Lupita Guzman, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name or anyone on here. Does the GCR include prosperity packages? Yes, it's supposed to answer that question really quick. It was separated, and I wanted to do a whole separate video on that, but I kind of wanted to direct my attention away because it can kind of have you feeling a certain type of way, being negative, that should have, in my opinion, the prosperity packages should have taken place first, because they keep talking about these humanitarian projects that they're so-called philanthropists and they want us to help out. But you also are hearing about these private exchanges if they really are taking place. I don't know. I don't have a source that high up. I do have some sources that have confirmed and confided some things to me privately. But however, I don't have anybody that I've confirmed, because they are, what I hear, supposedly supposed to sign non-disclosure agreements or whatnot, if that is true, because I'm just going by the intel providers. I'm just like you guys. I listen to the different conference calls that are out there, and do research. But from what I understand, just in my opinion, that the prosperity programs should have paid out. And yes, some of them were real. I don't think that all of them were. Everything is a scam. Once again, there is legitimacy. Check out this movie called Changes on the Horizon. It may provide clarification. Please watch. You can watch it for free on YouTube, and it talks about what's going on with the GCR and gives a lot of insight. It's called Changes on the Horizon. Please check that out. Alan Thomas in the chat says, "You doing good work, bro. Thank you. I appreciate it." Ego out get. I'm not sure how to really pronounce that particular screen name. It says, "This is all imaginary. You know that." Okay, I kind of see where you're coming from in a sense, because I was working on some material, but the reason, once again, I'm doing a vlog video instead of a screen capture. I was working on showing a correlation to the Wizard of Oz. Not a lot of people earlier on in the movement, some people talked about that, and some of the elites are aware. There's one family I can name in particular, that there is a connection with the Wizard of Oz dealing with this type of information. So members of the ruling class elite, I discovered, I won't mention how, some years back I discovered this. They are aware. When someone in the chat mentioned this is all imaginary, too, because this information is encrypted. I recommend, once again, check out the movie National Treasure with Nicolas Cage. Okay, Brendan Carberry in the chat, research articles 3 and 4 of the UCC extensively before passing off any promissory notes. Also look into picking up a hardbound version of Bouvier's 1856 Law Dictionary. Yeah, this could be why some people are getting in trouble with the Treasury doing site drafts. You know, I saw part of that video. I looked at that Virgo Triad did. However, I do know for a fact that some years ago, I had helped assisted a former girlfriend of mine with a bond. It was a form of a bill of exchange or negotiable instrument. Wasn't necessary, because some people put bill of exchange in their title, but it just said bond at the top, and said equality under law is paramount, mandatory by law. And I actually hadn't used it yet. I taught her everything that I knew at the time. She actually followed what I taught her to the very T. Sent it off registered mail, and we met at Borders Books. She showed me where they had removed on her credit report. She had discharged, I think, not only one bill. I think one of them was like a hospital bill, and it was another bill, but it went through. And also, some years later, she had invited her sister to one of the meetings, actually her half sister, and her half sister had success discharging her student loan, and she would have never woken up to this information if this wasn't real. This so-called sovereign citizen movement, this stuff is fake. You know, look the other way because of what these so-called gatekeepers are telling you. But no, I know that the Secretary of Treasury was discharging debt at one time. But as Brendan is mentioning in the chat section, I've heard about Article 3 and 4, also Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, that some of these people may not be structuring their paperwork correctly. Could also be the reason why years ago, credit to Barton Butts did excellent research. And a lot of gatekeepers suffered like being like similar to guinea pigs. They, I think, in my opinion, didn't know any better. But if you don't have the document structured correctly legally, then if you have gatekeepers who are on a witch hunt, you know, very similar to what they're doing to Trump with this whole Russia probe, then they will nitpick and find anything, and he got locked up. But there's some things I can obviously tell you just don't do certain types of instrument. You don't put routing numbers in instruments because they're copywritten. I believe it's a certain way, but I'm not going to go over that because this is not legal advice, and I did give a disclaimer. or whatnot, there's a certain way that these documents have to be structured. And there's even a way they train you if you go on to school to be a paralegal or a lawyer. And when you want to file certain documents for the county, a friend of mine discovered looking up the state statute. He actually was able to get this from somebody who worked at the county. They said, we cannot give legal advice. However, they gave him a critical jewel. They said, look up the state law statute in particular governs how it actually explains how your templates are supposed to be. So different states are differently. So you have to look up the laws for your specific state, depending on if, they want something to have a 2-inch margin from the paragraph, the way you structure the document. But they're nitpicking over stuff like this. And because you also have gatekeepers like this, like Virgo Triad and others who are trying to sabotage this information purposely and trying to dox people and claim that this isn't real. And I'm going over credible information that I've experienced and witnessed to share with you guys out there, because I wanted to clear up some of the myths. Not saying that she isn't making a point with certain things, but however, you have to look at both sides of the spectrum. There's pros and cons, and there's another side that she's not telling you or she's not going over. There's a legitimate side. So I just want to be clear on that. Says you can't pull out anything out of the TDA because it isn't real. Okay, I say that's up for debate. I doubt that it isn't not real. It said ego to get out or something like that. It's the screen name. Your birth certificate is just a piece of paper that says when and where you were born. It's not a financial instrument. Actually, it's a duality. It's a combination of both. It not only says where you were born, but it is a form of a financial instrument. I had a friend of mine when I first got involved in this information that is inaccurate. That in the chat right there, a friend of mine, he's from Maryland, and told me he was coming from an open mind. There was things that we didn't agree with dealing with religion. But one thing he could tell that I wasn't lying. He said his birth certificate at the bottom said American Banknote Company. Ooh, American Banknote Company. And this individual in the chat is saying it's not a financial instrument. So, dude, a lot of times people, you behind a fake account, you're not showing a real face. You're not. It's not even doesn't even appear to be a regular name, and you're supposed to be credible. This is what I'm talking about. This is how also you guys can detect gatekeepers when they're not showing you their real face and they want to be credible. Don't take this credible. But I just proved and just debunked right here on the spot that's inaccurate what he said. And there's other people that have mentioned this. You can look up people's birth certificate said American Banknote Company and there's a particular company and it's put on special paper too, just like the currency. But I didn't want to get too far off track, but I'm just showing you, it's Alan Thomas in the chat. Oh, he's coming back saying you're wrong, bro. Yeah, thank you, Alan Thomas. Yep, you are correct. That's, trolls, for example, always behind not showing their real faces, real cowardly, no credibility, and I'm going over, I understand anonymity, but at the same time, I can tell, but this is supposed to be a Q&A where I want to answer questions and provide credibility. He says nobody has succeeded. Let's see in here. Kind of got proof of the date. Let me kind of jumped ahead or it kind of went down. He says, okay, nobody has succeeded at accessing these accounts because they aren't real. I disagree with that. Miss Nugent says it's real. You just have to know how to control yourself as a private business, very private. He's coming back, says, if you have access to all of this money, why are you still poor? Yeah, that is a good point. Some of the reasons why there's the cabal, the ruling class elite, or you can say definitely the banking community has had a stronghold. You've also there's been evidence that's come out, numerous evidence, not pointing to any particular story, but there's people out there that know politicians even stealing money. There was even some people that brought up the Leo Wanta funds. Leo Wanta, look up this whole story with Leo Wanta. Is not just dealing with the prosperity programs and the GCR, but the story behind Leo Wanta will explain. Also, there is truth to what Karen Hudis and Benjamin Fulford are saying. Doesn't mean you have to necessarily co-sign everything they said, but I've done research into this, and this is real. It says this guy isn't a lawyer or an accountant of any kind. He's just some idiot rambling on YouTube. Okay. His big resource is a Nicolas Cage movie. Okay. Well, I can definitely see a troll. You're all going to end up trying to commit financial fraud. I'm not trying to. One thing I'm going to give it in the disclaimer, I'm not, once again, and I encourage everyone, as I say in my disclaimer, please do your own research and homework. At the same time, use good judgment. When you are involved in this information. This information is not for the weak-minded or weak. You have some people out here what they're trying to do too, and this is why I don't have any clients yet. I have to research into it, but I've had people literally beg me to for consultation. I said maybe down the line, but I want to look up, the appropriate way, legally and lawfully to set that up. I'm still doing the research. There's a lot of research because I don't want to just jump into something